Hey everybody, how's it going? All right, so I am recording this actually before the actual strike decision is supposed to be made. So, like I said, I'm going to continue teaching as though like there is no strike. And if there is a strike, I'll be posting this. Anyway, actually, my dog wants to come up and join me. Oh, here we go. Here he is. Say hi. Anyway, um, and those of you who are choosing to participate in a strike, like I said, we'll make up. I'm going to reiterate this actually that I'm actually um, you'll just have to basically make up the work after the strike is over, and that's it. Okay, so I plan to continue to hold classes, that sort of thing, but I'm actually recording this for both my online class and for my in-person class. I'm just not going to be holding in-person classes. So since you're both doing the same assignment at this point, um, I can discuss this same assignment, which is the data journalism assignment, as well. You're also doing both doing the feature assignment, and you both have discussion points, and you can hopefully you can use information from those discussion points for your feature assignment. My in-person class actually got a chance to talk to each other ahead of time interview, so that was good. That's You're both doing feature stories on the weather, so just remember that those deadlines are coming up. Um, the plan again with the strike is actually to again send these lectures via email. I just won't post anything new on Canvas. However, still, if you're choosing to participate in the class, still please send your assignments to the assignment entries on Canvas. Okay. The data journalism assignment. Let me talk about that, and actually, this will be a repeat for the in-person class because I've already talked about this. But I just want to make clear, because apparently there was a lot of confusion about that assignment, and I almost feel like maybe people like, was he serious? Is he like, he can't be giving away the answers, is he? Well, I basically was, and how to write that story. Let's actually go to the shared screen. Um, and the whole idea again is that this is modern day journalism. Okay, yes, that's the Mets. And the idea was to, um, you know, your story is about a trend, identifying a trend. Okay, that is the newest, biggest thing about the story. Um, this is what reporters do now. And again, the idea was actually to provide like the reader, whether it be a parent or a student or whatever, guide, a guardian, whatever, some idea like where things are heading. And I made pretty clear, just got to say that this is not a story about the averages of the tuition increases over the last 5 years. The 5 years I picked were, I mean, I could have picked 10 years, but I picked 5 years. Okay, because five is typically like what journalists go by: 5 years, 10 years in terms of trends. But I wasn't looking for the averages. See, everything has to be done in context here, and when everything is done in context, that means comparisons have to be made. If you were to write a story about the average tuition increase, I mean, what's that? What does that tell people? Not much, right? However, you would probably do something, you have to give it some context. So maybe you're doing a story about the average tuition increase over the last 5 years. You compare it to other schools, like comparable schools, like maybe University of Michigan or Penn State or places like that, and see how much they've raised tuition on average over the last 5 years, and then do that. That would be the theme of your story. How does Rutgers average tuition rate compare? How is it compared to other schools of similar type? Okay, that's not what we were doing. We're looking at how many times did Rutgers raise the tuition over the last 5 years, literally or lead, and many people got this. Rutgers has raised tuition blank times over the past 5 years. I was telling my in-person class this, and, I mean, this is actually like, there's not a lot of what you would call maybe art to it, but a lot of times when you're coming out with a story in a news organization, there's a formula. It's yes, I would love to let people just kind of like just go freelance and go wild and write stream of consciousness stuff. But the purpose of being a journalist is actually just to release information, give people context, give people history, that sort of thing. Inform people. It's still that is our product. Okay. And what I was saying was basically at Bloomberg, for instance, they sometimes they do the same stories over and over again. One of the things I was hoping, well, Bill talked about, if you were on my online class and if you watched the tape of my in-person class, you got to see Bill Borden, former Reuters reporter, talk about how they almost like have essentially like write the same stories over and over again in business. And they have this thing where businesses report their quarterly earnings. And those stories are written the same way every single time. They compare the first quarter of 2023 to like the first quarter of 2022. And what they do is actually they don't even have the reporter actually write the story. They give them a template. And in the template, there's stuff that looks just like this. There's basically a paragraph and you fill in the blank. And then you send it in because it's speed. I mean, you have to get it right. That's the most important thing, but it's also speed that's involved. It's the internet. So you have to fill in the blanks and that's it. Okay. And then after that, I was looking for basically this. I was looking for the general reasons why. Rutgers says it's, and I mean, this basically, you don't have to like mention a specific year when you say this. Just like look at the collective 5 years and say Rutgers says it's raised tuition that many times because, okay. And again, it usually has something to do with like budget, that sort of thing. And this is a macro to micro. Every story you think of the inverted pyramid, macro to micro, big idea to smaller ideas. Then you get into the specifics. And that's when I was looking for those particular years that were unique. Okay. The largest years. Okay. There were actually 2 years where it was tied for the largest increase. Okay. Some of you didn't make note of that. And I made a point of making note of that. There was actually 2 years it was tied. And I'll tell you, it was 2.9. Okay. Percent. Okay. And there was 1 year that bucked the trend. That was a very important year. And the reasons why I was actually looking not just for you to just say, well, they didn't raise it that year, whatever, because of whatever. I was looking for actually a little more depth, like maybe some quotes, that sort of thing, like just additional paragraph that explain, we don't want to hurt students, whatever they were saying, even if it was bullshit, whatever. That sort of thing, okay. But like the largest years, I was looking for maybe like more specific reasons. I mean, yes, it's similar to like their general reasons, but with more specific years as to why they raised tuition those particular years at the highest level over the last 5 years, which is 2.9%. I think one of the years, or maybe both of them, has something to do with faculty salaries, which is all part of expenses, but let's blame the faculty, that sort of thing. So it's a very formulaic story. You go from the big idea, the big reasons, to the more specific reasons. 1 year, buck the trend. Can't still say why. Okay. And then you get into the student reaction, and then some of you had like it almost themed around entirely on the student reaction. I made it emphatic. That has to go to the bottom of the story. That's important to the story, but it's the least important. Okay. The inverted pyramid story. This is not going to be like your feature weather assignment. This is going to be your, this is going to be a story mostly about they raised tuition over the last 5 years and why. Okay. And then get into specifics about that. Then the student reaction. I was looking for like anecdotes there. Okay. Anecdotes that basically, like paraphrase anecdotes, similar to what we did with the online. We did this in both classes too, the online class stories. Okay. Um, you know, just basically you being the reporter and the writer interpreting what people were saying and how they're impacted by those tuition increases. And then somewhere identify in the story like the increases each year's, if there was each year's. Okay. So that's what I was looking for there. Okay. So, hopefully some of you will see this on Monday and be able to, those of you on my online class has a deadline on Monday. My in-person class has a deadline on Tuesday. And like I said, I'm switching in my in-person classes if there is a strike to online. So asynchronous. All right. So anyway, so your assignments are due on Tuesday. Okay. All right, so let's see here. Let's actually go to, this is yeah, I'm using Kim as an example here. This is a B plus. it was good. I mean, he had basically 4 times in the last 5 years. Okay. Oh, I just gave something away. But the only thing I really changed was his general reasons, which he had kind of buried down low. Okay. But responding to annual inflation, Rutgers has said has raised tuition, support university programs and services. It may become a huge amount. Blah blah blah. He's raised tuition by fees extra 0.5% in recent years, resulting in basically the impact, that sort of thing. I mean, I moved this general reasons up to the top, and basically that's what I was looking for, was that. And then he gets into the specifics about, you know, like this is actually how he handled identifying each year, okay, and which increases there were. But he also made a point of saying, like, when there was the highest increases and the reasons for them. And here basically he had Zhao Zeng talking about, he had this as like a really long quote, and I turned it into a paraphrase anecdote. See, this is at the bottom of the story. He said he needs to pay all the money by himself and has to work 8 hours a day in summer vacation, earn all the money. I should have said he needs. I'm sorry. He needs. um, and then better to paraphrase. And then basically we just have one quippy quote right here. I won't have to pay extra money to buy things I want if the fee increase higher and higher, it goes higher and higher, I think you meant to say. Okay. So that's at the bottom of the story. Okay. All right. So that's what I was looking for there. Okay. All right. So again, like I am still using Canvas to collect the assignments. And now this is actually the let's see here. This is actually the in-person class. I put up a discussion point knowing that possibility of a strike, even though we had the opportunity to actually talk to each other in class, but I put this up just so that people would have some sort of resource to go to if we go online. Let's see how people are doing so far, and so far no reactions, but okay. Anyway, so let's go to the online class then. I'll tell you what, if I'll share the online class reaction if people have an issue with getting reaction for this for the feature story again. Okay, here we are. There's the online class. And I post these lectures on Mondays. And again, if there's a strike, I'll be sending them via email. And only 2 reactions so far. For class participation is an issue there. As I'm recording this, there's still no strike yet. So, but here we have people talking about how they're basically impacted by the weather. And I mentioned some of the things I mentioned, again, how are they impacted by the weather? It's not just driving or that sort of thing, because not everybody commutes to school, especially if you're working from home or whatever. But you may have to deal with what are you wearing that day? Okay. And if you do have in-person classes and that sort of thing, what do you wear to that in-person class? We've had some days recently have been wildly inconsistent. It's been freezing as hell in the morning. And then at night, there was a later day, I think there was one day where it hit 80. It was very odd. So, that could really impact how much you pack that day, that sort of thing. Maybe you don't want to take off your sweatshirt or something like that because it's a pain in the ass. So you have to basically tie it to your waist or something like that, or maybe you just keep it on, you sweat, and that's the pain in the ass. So those are actually some of the biggest decisions you have to make each day when you're a student. That's just the way it is. Okay. And what I'm doing is I'm actually going to show you this video, which I actually showed to my in-person class, but I'm going to show everybody here. It's in the assignment section for both classes. And again, this will just serve as a reminder for those of you who are in my in-person class. All right. What's due. And what you have to do again to do an effective feature assignment. Okay. Using the example of taking information from a discussion point. I also again have an example of a feature story that worked, which I've discussed already. Okay. So here's the video of basically, and again, I know the way I delivered this, I wish I'd done it better. Maybe I should actually redo it, but let's just show how this can be done again. Okay. And just wait for my slow internet to go. I hope you guys are all handling yourselves okay, given the situation. Okay, so here we go. All right. So let's just watch this, okay? I mean, basically, you know, if you really want to like a big hint about how to handle things here, you can just basically take like, I don't know, like I said, I haven't read through all these yet, okay? But, you know, maybe just take like, let's just take 3. We got Kaylee, Cameron, and Joseph. A little copy here, okay? And it's like reduce the point size so it's not too much in your face. Okay. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Do it right here. Let's do this. Okay. So I'm taking the information and putting it together. A special cut paste. Okay. All right. So this was say Cameron, Kaylee. Copy that the first name here. I'm sorry. And that was Joseph Zarrell. All right. So anyway, this is what I do actually a lot now because actually like a lot of the interviews I do actually I get a transcript for. So I literally like will just cut and paste right from it. Just like you do with those news releases, you just cut and paste from it. And then you can kind of shape it so that it actually is your writing. Shape it in your writing and also fit it within the context of your story. You know, use transitional phrases, kind of go from one paragraph to the next or one point to the next. Okay. All right. So we can do something like this. Joseph Zarrell, Joe, I forget. You're able to say like, you know, Rutgers. As said, the weather as of late has been pretty ridiculous. Some days it's waking up to 60 to 70 degree weather. The next day, again, well, I'm actually paraphrasing here because I can actually cut what he's saying without getting too wordy, you know, and make it easier to read. Okay, and people tend to read paraphrasing and storytelling and narrative more than read quotes. Okay, weather is so interesting, especially now because of how random it is. One day it can be beautiful, next day it can just be disgusting and muggy. Which sounds like a pretty quote. That's probably like one anecdote or one quote right there. Okay. All right. Then we got Cameron. Wait, spell your name right. Oh, it's right there. Let's see here. Cameron Riallo, on the other hand, said she really enjoys the weather. You do like a partial quote. Maybe even gets to experience full on. Maybe, you know, if we only experienced cold or hot weather instead of both, I think we would get sick of the constant higher temperatures. Yeah. That right? Got Kaylee Warden down here. Kaylee, sorry if I forgot her name. I know it's just in front of me. Kaylee Warden said she has been loving the weather this past week. As Rutgers is experiencing She said this is her favorite time of year because you start to see everyone going outside more. And then, like I said, and by paraphrase, you can actually cut down on things that don't sound so repetitive. The changing weather, she has been pointing out in the sun to do more work or simply bask in the sun. However, I know that the temperature will be going back down soon, and that is concerning because of global warming. Just that. All right. So there you go. Now I've just given you essentially like how now we can stick transitions in between those anecdotes and those quotes. I gave you just three of them right there. That's how simple it can be. And then, basically there's also a little bit more description in this kind of story. I can actually you try a little bit harder to try to paint a picture of what everybody's going through. Was wearing basically we get to see what Joe is wearing, that sort of thing. Get a little bit, maybe ask those sorts of questions you're interviewing, or actually you make that observation in your notes, wouldn't otherwise make. Like, what are they wearing? How are they acting? What's the expression on their face? That's what you kind of thing you do in a feature story. Okay. Now, here's again the big difference. Okay, so maybe I add in a transition right here. Add in a transition right here. Then I add in a transition right here. Okay. All right. But we have to come up with a theme for the story, kind of like liking the hot weather, but not liking the mixed situation so much. Okay. So, you try to think of maybe what would be a lead for this story. Okay. All right. So Rutgers students, you say they've been frustrated with the gloomy weather recently, but they're pleased that the weather has at least gotten warmer. I know it doesn't sound like earth-shattering news, but again, it's supposed to be an engaging story, a light story. People like to kind of light features sometimes just because it's something relatable, like I talked about with the clothing and stuff like that. Okay, now here's the big difference. I wrote that like a lead, right? Only the big difference here is that's not going to be your lead. That's going to be your nut graph. This is how you can actually construct this feature story, so that actually you can kind of envision what would look like more as a straight news story, and kind of develop it into a nut graph. What you're going to do is you're going to take one of these anecdotes maybe from here, okay, and I would take maybe Kaylee's actually. That seemed to kind of echo the whole sentiment I just expressed there. Basically sum up the notes you got, which are right there in the discussion points, and you put it at the top. Now you have an anecdotal lead. We can always return to Kaylee. We don't have to actually leave her high and dry. A lot of times, actually, what they do in these feature stories, they start off with a person, and then they end with the same person. But by starting off with Kaylee, we can actually drill down to maybe her personal frustrations or pleasantries or whatever that more specific to her. We could drill down and get more detail. Okay. So that's all. See what I did there? I just take essentially one anecdote to the top. So now it starts with Kaylee Warden said she's been loving the weather this past week. Rutgers been experiencing the 70s and mid-80s. She said this is her favorite time of year because you start to see everyone going outside. With this change in weather, she has been going outside and doing schoolwork, to read, or to simply bask in the sun. Nice. I like the idea of bask in the sun. That's good writing right there. It's good. Kaylee actually provided essentially, but that was actually a good quote she had there. Essentially, that we turn into a paraphrase. Hopefully, but then we get into the however. However, I know the temperature is going to be going back down soon, and that is concerning in regards to global warming. Okay, and the nut graph. Okay, people are kind of looking for something here to basically give me an idea, because it is a feature story, but it's also a news story at the same time. So they are looking for news. Okay. But they're hopefully by this point they're kind of hooked in by the stylistic writing and the engaging story, the basking in the sun, the sense of being there, the sense of feeling. Rutgers should say they've been frustrated by the gloomy weather recently, but they're pleased that the weather has at least gotten warm. Okay. Maybe some students say it's nice to have a consistent idea what they're wearing. It's kind of what Joe got into. Yeah. See, blah blah blah. Or you could say or even it's frustrating not knowing what to wear or what. Okay. That's it. Right? All right. So again, for some of you that might be redundant, others not so much. But also, I also believe in like repetition, and I also believe in like, repeating things or reminding people what to look for, sort of thing. On both classes, again, like I said, I'm not posting anything new to Canvas, but there is stuff on Canvas that'd be good to look at. Both classes, online and in person. It'd be good to look at the section week 12, April 13th. Yes, April 13th. Feature news, okay, because I have again some examples. Um, as I showed both classes of anecdotal stories with anecdotal leads at work. I have some reading materials in both classes, basically talking about how, you know, the differences between the two and how I feel. Actually, I did assign chapters 8 and 12 for both classes to read on feature writing, um, but I felt like this reading material was actually better. Characteristics of feature writing to the reader. The feature started writing seems to have a more relaxed style of writing than a news story. It may be easier to read than a news story, and because of its content, it may be more entertaining. I mean, this is something you use for more for like entertainment stories, stuff like that. There's a greater amount of detail and description in feature stories. Again, as I mentioned to both classes, I mean, now we're not just looking for accuracy, clarity, and focus, but we're looking at the where, or we're looking at basically like what's there in front of them. Like it's not just a matter of them talking now to you. It's just a matter of like, where are they talking? Like, what are they wearing when they're talking? Especially like with the weather being the way it was. I went to it's funny. The Mets. I'm a big Mets fan. Baseball. They were supposed to have their home opener on Thursday. They postponed it because of the supposedly bad weather. It turned out to be nice on Thursday. It was like 60, 70 degrees. And then we went on Friday and I underdressed and it was like 30, 40 degrees. So that's just the way the weather's been. So that's the kind of this. So I ended up freezing my ass off. And this shirt I'm buying right now cost me $90. I had to buy that at the stadium. That would be a great anecdote for this story, right? I have to go to the Rutgers bookstore or whatever to buy a sweatshirt because I'm didn't expect the day like to be like this. It's kind of detail that you would see in this type of story, like a feature story that you wouldn't see normally in like a straight news story. Okay. Um, all right. So then you have what you call an anecdotal lead or a narrative lead, and this again in both classes on the modules, you'll see the comparison. Traditional news leads gives a who, what, where, why, how as much as possible, but the narrative lead describes a dramatic point in the story. Like I said, really starting off with like one person is the best way to do it. Not like 10 people, 5 people wandering around tired and everything because of the cold weather. No, you look at one person so you can drill down deeper into the deeper detail. Okay. And then you can almost go returns to like the typical format, and then it ends usually like with like an anecdote and a quote. It basically goes into again anecdotes. Anecdotes are big and important here, more important than they were in the data journalism assignment. And you go into each person's personal story about how they're impacted by the weather. Okay. There's more comparisons here. This is an example of a really narrative story. Um, that I wanted to just show you from like previous books that you could read, see how they go into like certain detail. This one says they carried knapsacks and bags to tote loot. They had a screwdriver to pry open doors and windows. They used latex gloves. They acted like professional criminals, but officials say they were teenage burglars coached and directed by a Pearl Harbor, oh my God, Palm Harbor woman who's I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time reading this, whose son and daughter were part of the gang. So basically, this was like a crime story that you would typically do as like almost like a follow-up story once you get more detail and you start with essentially a softer lead. Okay. Basically go into like some of the smaller detail that's going in. You kind of engage the reader and you get them to read it and get them to be engaged by the dramatic pauses, and you don't know what's going to happen next. And the idea is to really kind of hook the reader into this story so they actually will read a story from top to bottom. Okay. Um, there's some more material here again showing the difference between a straight news lead and an anecdotal lead. Okay. Um, basically after a mass street protest in Poland, legislators with the country's ruling party have abruptly reversed their positions and voted against a proposal to completely ban abortion. Let's see what they say here. At the dilapidated morgue in northern Brazilian city of, it's actually a different story. Director of, I can't pronounce his name, walks over the blood smeared floor to where the corpses are kept. He points, here's this is actually how they started this story. It's not about abortion, but it's basically like more detailed, kind of walking you through each step of the process, each step of the story dramatically. Okay. All right. Like I said, chapters 8 and 12 provide more of the same. Again, like after chapter 8 shows like alternative leads. I mean, they're gonna, it's because some of it also deals with some of the stuff we've already dealt with. And then the chapter 12 deals with like essentially like a feature story. And that's actually the textbook we actually have. And I meant to actually like sign in on that, but anyway, so let me just stop share for a second. Let me just actually sign in and see what happens here. Apologize for this. So I meant to actually sign it. It actually signs itself out sometimes. So, anyway, so yeah, I mean, basically the idea here that like, you know, a news site, a newspaper provides more than just the straight news. I mean, it provides, again, as I said before, like less of this type of news extension of the news as it's done in the past, but it's actually, you know, the idea is that it wants to actually still provide some sort of like material for the reader, so they just don't have like read it like it's like a Twitter feed, you know, because Twitter does that. It gives the reader an opportunity to do more than that, you know, to actually read something and get engaged. And like I said, there's a difference between what they used to call the Sunday newspaper and essentially the Tuesday newspaper. And the Sunday paper used to have like the time to read it, and then you would take the train into the city maybe to do like you know, fun things, that sort of thing, and you would maybe read the paper on the way and you read longer stories. When you read the paper on the train and on the way into the city during the week, you're reading fast, you're reading just trying to get the news, try to get it out of the way. So again, some of this stuff is going to be repetitive a little bit for some of you, but I didn't really get a chance to show my in-person class. Alternative leads. Okay. Here's a straight news lead. You know, city officials debated the possibility of a tax increase. But then like you could actually take maybe a more creative approach. City officials are going to need a pretty big rabbit's foot to keep the city's budget in back. And now that's not exactly the anecdotal lead I've been talking about. But again, there are like ways that like where you can kind of maybe veer around, if like all depending on your audience, if they want to actually see something that's a little bit more than just like, you know, black and white. Maybe they want to actually like see some details first. Maybe it's almost like borderline analytical, perhaps. All right. Also, you know, again, the anecdotal lead is also another term for is delayed lead, because what you have essentially is like what I go to call teases that come in first to the story, as we saw with that crime story with the teenage burglars, the nuts, the bolts, the screws, and all that stuff. But then suddenly there's a nut graph that essentially acts as like a delayed lead. Okay. These leads again are like multi-graph leads. Again, please do not have a quote, a lead that's a quote. I'm not actually like big into that at all. I don't think they work. Quotes are supposed to be vague and quippy and that sort of thing. You don't put them at the top of the story. You still want to give the reader some idea of like what's going on. Suspenseful leads. I mean, basically, you know, just the way the paragraphs are set up, you know, it's almost like they stop. It's a fire bell that signals the beginning of each firefighter's day. Bam. And then a pause. It is the same bell that summons firefighters to action. That's how basically they teach how these anecdotal leads work, is they're supposed to give you those sorts of dramatic pauses. And sometimes they come in with irony in the nut graph. Sometimes they come in with maybe like a scary twist. Okay. All right. This is actually the feature news section, chapter 12. Again, like it talks about like, you know, maybe like some of the things I might actually like focus on, you know, that watching TV, homeschooling, dorms versus apartments. I mean, it could be, and again, these stories, I mean, they will be newsy stories, but, and they'll use those same newsy topics. But what they'll do is they'll actually essentially like, it'll be a follow-up story, a sidebar, maybe branch off some part of it and kind of explore it a little bit deeper, like I showed you with that Somali pirate story. Um, the lead of a feature story, the only requirement for the lead of a feature story is that it interests people, making them want to stay with the story to learn more. The story can start with either a summary or a type of alternative lead described in chapter 7 and 8, like we talked about. Essentially, like, once more the laden bell toiled mornings about September 11th. Loved ones recited the names of a dead ground zero and the wounded but resilient America paused yesterday to remember a time as. That's actually not necessarily like anecdotal lead, but it's actually more of like how a nut graph would sound because it's more detailed. It kind of like gets into the specifics of the moment, the emotions of the moment. Um, I know we did a profile story at the beginning of the semester in each class. This actually was probably how you would typically handle a profile story, is that you would actually probably begin it with some sort of anecdotal lead, with suspenseful like teases, that sort of thing. Um, you know, there's different categories of features, like, and sometimes they're not so newsy. Like it says like hobby features, participatory features. That's actually where you might actually go first person, that sort of thing. Okay. Um, all right. But it's more of like that's you could use these feature stories with these anecdotal leads basically for like a newsy story, or you can but they're typically used for like more entertaining story, this sort of thing, like a concert you're covering or something like that. The more in-depth stuff, so like a personality profile, that sort of thing. So all right, so that's it. I'm still hoping that like there's no strike, but we'll see. And if there is a strike, I'll probably be sending out a separate strike message so to all my classes. So anyway, that's it, guys. I will be talking to you, and thanks very much. And let me know if you have any questions. Thanks very much.